If you guys didn't see the last video where I fully take the engine out, go check it out. We did a great job, except we left a giant mess behind. I want to salvage this wiring harness, so I'm going to take the dash out and attempt to feed the wiring harness through the firewall. The dash seems intimidating, but really there's just a few mounting points and the wiring to disconnect. My dash had a plastic cover over it, and you'll see why. It has deeper ravines than the Mariana Trench. There's several bolts across the top holding it in place. I missed two of them that are on the very outer edges that I realized later. I'll try to show some pictures of the screws that I'm loosening to get the dash out. Your mileage may vary because there's multiple ways to tackle this, and probably a couple things I didn't need to take apart, but I feel like this method was pretty easy and felt efficient. I often try to move or wiggle the dash to see where else it's bolted down at. Here I disconnect pretty much all the wiring harness that goes into the dash or behind it. Taking off the steering wheel is easy and gives you a lot of extra space. Just push down on the cover and turn it to take it off, and then loosen the locking nut. I then drop the steering column with a few bolts holding it in just to get it a little lower and out of the way. I finally find the last two bolts that I missed in the top corners. You'd think it'd be home free, but there's one last annoying thing holding this beast in, and that's the speed sensor that goes into the back of the gauge cluster. It's a fluid filled line, not an electrical one. It looks like this, and I had to use pliers to slowly undo it on the back of the speedometer. This thing's pretty heavy. Be careful moving this monster around if you have the turn signal and headlight stalks still attached. You don't want to break one of those off. Removing the blower, AC, and heater core assembly is much easier. I separate the blower motor and pull that out first. The rest of the assembly is just held in by a couple bolts, and there's actually two nuts on the inside of the firewall that hold it in also. Also disconnect this gasket seal thing here that's for the coolant lines into the heater core. And as you may guess, the heater core likely has some coolant still slushing around in it. The dash is out, AC and heater core is out. Look at all this space. Now I can finally feed all these wires through the firewall and get this harness out. In the passenger footwell, I just start disconnecting any connectors that go to the loom through the firewall. The infamous white box. This little plastic thing holds some wiring harnesses in place, and removing the connectors from the housing is a pain. A combination of using snips to make some relief cuts in the plastic and then using pliers to pinch the tabs together, eventually I got them loose. This took way too long, as you can see from the super sped up time lapse. Obviously I didn't save this thing, so if there's a way to take this out more cleanly, let us know in the comments. The driver's side footwell just has the ECU harness that goes through the firewall, so it's much easier on this side. However, to get to the firewall grommet on this side, you'll probably have to take out the wiper fluid reservoir and the pump. Now it's just going around the engine bay, freeing up all the random things that are wired into the loom, taking off the plastic clips that hold the harness in place. The relay box has a ton of stuff terminated inside of it. You could probably just leave the box attached to the harness, but pulling the connectors is super easy too. So that's it. This is the entire engine harness. Looking for this. So now onto the body or chassis harness, which works its way from the passenger footwell area to the rear of the car. First things first is getting these seats out. A little scary that they were only held in by 3 bolts instead of the 4 that they were supposed to be. The carpet's held in by these metal trim panels on the door sills and a trim piece in the footwell. My carpet was really dusty and kicking up all sorts of stuff, so I put a mask on when I pulled it out. These layers are definitely not OEM. The 2 rear corner lights and the license plate lights had to be taken out in order to get the wiring out. The panels on both sides of the trunk are a tight fit. I had to take the struts off of the hatch to get these panels on both sides out. There's a wiring harness back here for the antenna motor. There's a service door here for the wiring to the fuel pump, I believe. I cut the wires instead because I'm blind, I guess. These interior trim panels have plastic rivets or clips that aren't like modern cars. I had to push the center of the clip in with a small nail, and then I could pull the clip out. Most of them came loose pretty easily, but I did have to drill one of them out. How do you know it's an aftermarket install? You got 3 different screws and 1 missing. The passenger side of the trunk has what's called a liquid vapor separator for the fuel vapors and a metal shield that goes over it. Once again, I had to remove the hatch strut in order to get it out. With the separator tank out of the way, you can feed the dome wiring through. There's also a tab back here holding the wires in. Once it's loose, I could fish the wires through. And boom, I just removed both wiring harnesses from the Datsun. That's pretty much all the wiring in this car. I did clip a couple wires, but overall there's nothing left in here. So that's it for this video. Subscribe to follow along with the build and leave a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'll catch y'all next time.